This is the Transition Series Topics for the EMT, Topic 4, Anatomy and Physiology and Cellular Metabolism. Our objectives in this first section are to understand how cellular metabolism relates to the assessment and management of patients, discuss anabolism and catabolism, and aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. We also would like to understand how metabolism and cellular processes must be understood to prepare the EMT for medical and trauma situations. EMTs, you think of our patients in terms of the big picture, the macro level. We look at the fundamentals, the airway, ventilation, oxygenation, circulation. But in order to keep a patient alive, we also should think about what's happening at the cellular level and what's necessary to keep cells alive. Every aspect of emergency care is geared to keeping the cells of the patient alive. This topic is provided to enhance the understanding of the EMT about cellular metabolism and how changes in the patient are due to changes in cellular integrity. Cellular integrity must be at the core of our thinking in understanding how best to assess and treat our patients. Metabolism is the ongoing process of chemical work taking place in cells that keep them alive. For a cell to stay alive, it must receive a constant supply of fuel and oxygen. Metabolism in toto refers to the sum total of all the reactions taking place in all the cells of the body. Thousands of chemical reactions take place every second in the body and are essential to life. Most of these reactions are linked and part of a series of metabolic reactions that are required to produce proteins, enzymes, and the other building blocks of cells and life. If a single cell dies, the organism will be unfazed. But if the disturbances that led to the death of a single cell spread, they can cause death in a tissue or an organ system and eventually lead to the death of the patient. There are two key metabolic processes we should understand: anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is the process by which larger molecules are made from smaller ones, whereas catabolism is the process that breaks down larger molecules into smaller ones. Anabolism uses energy and forms water in the process. The material provided is critical for cellular growth. An example of anabolism would be the formation of glycogen from glucose molecules. Glycogen is then stored in the liver and other organs for later use by the body. Another example would be the creation of proteins. Catabolism requires specific enzymes to break down large molecules into smaller ones. The enzymes use water to split the molecules, and energy is released during the process. A side note, dehydration can impact the effectiveness of catabolism. The rate of catabolism is similar to the rate of anabolism. Cellular respiration refers to the process whereby energy is transferred from a glucose molecule and made available for use within the cell. Oxidation is the process of breaking down the glucose molecules within the cell. This process releases heat, energy, in the form of the creation of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP molecules. ATP is the energy currency of the cell. It is the way that cells move energy about, store it, and use it. If a cell has insufficient ATP, it may die. Aerobic cellular metabolism is the process are those processes that require oxygen. The creation of sufficient cellular energy in the form of ATP is dependent on three reactions. Glycolysis is the first process, whereby a glucose molecule is broken into two pieces of pyruvic acid and two ATP molecules are released along with their high energy electrons. This process is anaerobic and does not require oxygen. From there, the citric acid cycle, which occurs within the mitochondria of the cell, uses the pyruvic acid that was produced during glycolysis and in the mitochondria produces carbon dioxide and many more high energy electrons and more ATP. These high energy electrons are passed down the chain and the energy is transferred to form even more ATP. The final electron carrier molecule is oxygen. With oxygen available, the final byproduct of aerobic cellular metabolism is water, carbon dioxide, and a large number of ATP molecules, as well as a certain amount of heat. ATP, water, and heat are all necessary for normal cell function. Carbon dioxide is passed to the blood and exhaled through the lungs. Here's a slide demonstrating how glucose is carried into the cell, how ATP is produced by the process that we just described using oxygen. In anaerobic metabolism, which is an older process, the mitochondria convert their pathway, use hydrogen molecules to rebuild pyruvic acid, and produce a smaller amount of ATP. In that process, lactic acid is built up within the cell. An example of this would be if an EMT is working hard, running or lifting or otherwise exerting themselves, and they use more oxygen than is immediately available to their cells. So they huff and they puff and restore the normal blood oxygen level and carry away lactic acid. But lactic acid may persist in the body for a period of time before it's broken down. If too much lactic acid remains within the cell, it will disrupt the cell membrane and cause the cell to die. On the macro level, excessive lactic acid may cause acidosis and cause the patient to suffer. Here's a slide depicting anaerobic metabolism, where glucose is used to recreate the pyruvic acid that anaerobic metabolism broke down to produce a small amount of ATP and the unfortunate byproduct lactic acid. Human beings are aerobic organisms and do not survive for any period of time without oxygen. Another essential piece of human physiology and of all mammals is the maintenance of a potential on either side of a membrane. This is essential to the functioning of nerves, to the functioning of cardiac muscle, to the functioning of smooth muscle, and to the functioning of voluntary muscle. There are many tissues within the body that must remain charged or rapidly recharge after being discharged in order for the body's normal metabolism to occur. Essential to this is the sodium-potassium pump, which pumps sodium and potassium to the appropriate side of the cell wall, maintaining a charge across that membrane. The sodium pump uses ATP. If ATP reserves have been exhausted, for example in anaerobic metabolism, the pump fails, the cells die and rupture. This is a graphic demonstrating how sodium is collected. ATP is broken into ADP and the energy produced opens the sodium pump and lets the sodium move out to line up on the far side of the cell membrane. The pump also brings in potassium, and when ATP is used to open the cell on the other side, potassium moves into the cell. So sodium and potassium are returned to their normal position. The cardiac cell or nerve or smooth muscle cell is recharged and ready to function again. We need to understand normal cellular metabolism to understand virtually every branch of medicine. We tend to treat the obvious macro level issues, but in doing so we're maintaining a constant healthy environment for the cells within our body, a state we refer to as homeostasis. If we fail to maintain homeostasis, cells may begin to die, and if large numbers of cells die, the process may be irreversible.